Hello, and welcome to Unexplained Possibilities Podcast. I'm your host, Melvin the Crimson Taurus, and unfortunately, Nima can't join us today. She's busy exercising her mind and also preparing for her next street fight. And, well, as you guys already know, if I'm live on a podcast, chances are I'm not alone, and this still remains true. Have you guys ever been asked what's your favorite scary movie? Well, I'm pretty sure our guest has. Maybe too many times to count at this point. And why wouldn't he? Seeing as though he is a horror movie enthusiast with knowledge in the genre, with more knowledge in the genre on his pinky finger than most people have in their entire mind. No joke, this guy's a walking encyclopedia of horror. It's amazing. So please welcome from the MOS Network and the host of Ministry of Horror, the man himself, Tezz.
Hey there, Mel. Thanks for having me on the show.
And thank you for coming on. Wow, now my buttons aren't working. Huh.
Oh, no.
This is going downhill, people. I don't know what happened. There we go. Okay, I'll just manually switch. But here we are. We're finally live. Jeez Louise. But yeah, it's that pesky ghost in the system. But hi, Tezz. How are you?
Hi, Mel. Yeah, I'm good, thank you. I'm good. It's been a real warm one over here in the UK. We're having a little mini heat wave, which if people normally associate England with dreary, rainy, cold weather, most of the time it is like that. So we don't really know how to handle the heat. But
Well,
other than that, Mel, all good over here. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right, but I have to know, what is your heat? Like what's the degrees over there?
So now I don't know conversions. I'm awful at that
Oh,
sort of
don't
thing.
worry, I'll
But
convert it.
well, today was 26 degrees Celsius, and I think tomorrow was scheduled to peak at 29, 30 degrees Celsius.
All right, so 26 degrees Fahrenheit.
Oh,
I
oh wow!
don't mean to openly laugh. This is not right. You're a
Oh,
guest
one
and I'm
second,
laughing.
my audio's gone funny again. Let
Oh
me
no.
just switch to my monitor.
The tech issues continue for us both. Hello, Darren, and
Oh man, it's all
welcome.
gone muted. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me? Uh-oh. We have a problem. Are you back?
Having tech issues.
Is it working now?
What's going on?
Oh no. We seem to have lost our guest. We can hear you. All right, 1 second, guys. Go and try and fix this.
All gone quiet, Mal.
Oh no. All right, can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. Can you hear me?
Yes. Okay, I know what happened. It was on my
What
end.
happened? Oh no, what happened?
Yeah, this computer's old and it's ready to die, and the USB went out for the software that we're using. Okay.
Oh, okay. So 26 degrees Celsius. So what was that in Fahrenheit? Sorry.
78 degrees Fahrenheit, which I openly laughed at because that is not hot, my friend.
Oh,
So
here's me over here going, oh God,
yeah,
I can't cope.
yeah. So I shouldn't laugh because you're a guest, but that's pretty freaking funny for me. But the good thing is, Darren, he's over there in Scotland, so he's suffering
Okay.
your version of heat as well. So
He feels my pain.
he
He feels my
feels your
pain.
pain. You're not alone. Jeez,
Oh,
that is
dear.
something. For what it's worth, it's 24 degrees Celsius where I'm at.
Okay.
So
Okay, so it's just slightly cooler.
Yeah, and I'm in a hoodie and
All
just
right.
relaxing. So, hello, paranormal witch. Welcome. Oh boy,
Hey.
that was a good laugh. Okay, so let's jump into this, man. Because, like I said, you are a horror enthusiast. You know your mess about horror, and you have a love for it. Where does that come from?
So if I had to pinpoint my love for horror, it was probably my introduction to Stephen King, which actually came from a VHS artwork. Growing up as a kid in the very early 90s, we had a local convenience store where you could have VHS rentals. So for the kids out there, the precursors to DVDs, big boxes that would contain tape. And I would go in there and I would see these cover artworks. They had things like the Terminator. I think it might have been T2 at that time. Um, Army of Darkness, which I didn't know that was part of a franchise. It looked like just some horror He-Man artwork. But then I saw the cover art for Stephen King's It, the 1990 miniseries with Tim Curry. And seeing that imagery of a clown that you just generally associate with the circus, smiley, happy, don't know any different at that age. That kind of then led me to start reading Stephen King way younger than I probably should have. And I guess it's that kind of, for me growing up, what drew me to horror was the interest to find something that would scare me. And I'm not saying like, oh, nothing scares me, nothing like that. I guess it's just the sensation of reading something or seeing something that then puts you a bit on edge. And that's kind of where I got my start, really. I'd read Stephen King's It when I was in junior school in the UK, which I guess is the one up from elementary
Middle
in
school.
America. Middle school, maybe, yeah. And then, reading The Exorcist, which I remember a teacher saying, "I don't think that's appropriate, you reading that just yet." I'm like, "Oh, I guess from some of the language, you probably might be right." And then seeing films on TV, and, just kind of discovering this whole world of horror, leading me to, like, John Carpenter, his films. I guess probably the first horror film I saw was, on TV, Halloween. They did a special presentation of John Carpenter's original Halloween, and yeah, from there really, it's kind of led me down that rabbit hole, Mel.
Yeah, no coming back ever since.
No,
It's just going deeper
no.
and deeper and deeper. So Darren, he's mentioning something here. Because I mentioned this, it's only fair that I ask, which I don't think you can answer this, but what's your favorite horror film?
That is tough. That is tough. I guess there's a handful of films that I can watch anytime and still enjoy it almost like it's the first time. Um, I'd have to kind of. I mean, I can't just give one. That is too tough. But I'd probably have to say it's really a toss up between John Carpenter's Halloween, John Carpenter's The Thing. Maybe also throw in there it's sci-fi horror, so I would say it counts. The Aliens,
Of
because
course.
again, seeing the artwork, seeing these images, in a shop of, and you look on the back cover and you kind of get these glimpses of this weird, horrible creature. Normally 9 times out of 10, alien entities in TV and film are greys.
Mhm.
Short, very thin, large eyes, grey skin. So seeing this kind of nightmare creature, um, that then just really got me so invested in that world, for good and bad. I'd probably say it's got to be one of those three. There's more modern films that have come along recently that I really enjoy. House of the Devil by Ty West, I think is excellent, and I love Ari Aster's two most recent films, Midsummer and Hereditary. But it's got to be, I suppose, probably one of John Carpenter's films that was just so pivotal in my teenage years for just drawing me in, because you've got the visuals, you've got whatever your antagonist is, you've got great protagonists, and the music as well. It hits on all senses for me.
I can agree with that. And Darren, we're going to actually go into that a little later, so no worries there. Um, Aliens, for me, I think is the ultimate way of doing a horror film, even if it has the sci-fi. Because usually with horror, we think supernatural, paranormal, or just straight up psychotic. But with Alien, it's perfect because it has every element you want in horror. You have a group of people in a tight corridor, they can't, it's no escape. You're
Yeah,
being stalked. You don't know what is exactly stalking you. You get a glimpse with, of course, the chest burster. It's like, but you don't actually see the alien, and it builds up. And that's something horror movies have to always, you have to have that build up so you can get that payoff. And the payoff when you finally see this thing is great. And you have Ripley is such a strong protagonist because she
yeah.
was flawed. And we spoke about this before we went live. A protagonist, a hero, should be flawed. And she's scared out of her mind. She doesn't know what's happening. People are dropping dead left and right. And she's just trying to live. It's
It's such a multifaceted film, because you could easily look at it and go, "Oh well, first film was one alien. Now they got loads, so they're like cannon fodder." But it's so much more than that, because it's also ultimately saying, you think one was scary. Now you're going to see a lot more, and you're going to see where they come from. Um, and in terms of the story, and especially the director's cut, which goes into it a bit more, you've not only got this woman who escaped the alien only to basically be asleep for them 55 years. Um, she's not really been being believed as to what happened, because the corporations just say, well, that was a lot of money and you've blown it up. We need to hold someone responsible. Corporate greed and all that. But also, like you say, she's terrified and she faces her fear, because there's like this mother's intuition. She meets obviously Newt, who's lost her family. We see that in the director's cut. And also, while she's been asleep, she's lost her only daughter, so she's got no family either. Um, so it's the ultimate story, and I think James Cameron showed that not only is he a great director, but he makes great sequels. So yeah, Aliens. I can't really say enough good things about it.
and
Um,
Welcome Grave, friend of
Grave.
mine from the gaming stuff. So yeah, it's great, man. And you touched on something, that being different movies that you just can't really pick from. And this is something that I think about often, but what makes a horror film? Define horror.
Um, so if I'm looking at horror as a whole, because I mean you can always talk about, like, your different subgenres, but ultimately what is horror? And I guess it kind of boils down to what scares you and what kind of puts you on edge to a degree. Um, I can go into like the monster films, slashers, stalk and kill, whatever, the gore films, the suspense films. For me, what makes a really good horror is tension. I want those scenes where you're almost holding your breath, because you're so enraptured in the moment. And I think for good tension, you have to have an excellent score. You have to have a director with that ability to let things breathe, or not jump from scene to scene to scene. Build those moments where you're expecting something to happen and you're waiting for something to happen, and it doesn't happen, but then something else happens. I guess I want tension. I want a strong protagonist. Um, Whether it's an individual or a group, I feel you have to have people that you root for, because when they're in peril, that again gives you that level of tension. Um, and I guess it kind of comes down to what type of antagonist you have. But then there's some excellent horrors where you don't necessarily have a direct antagonist. I mean, something a more recent one I mentioned a moment ago was Midsummer, and you could say that the cult, the commune, they're the antagonists, but it's kind of similar to the Wicker Man, where the commune have used nefarious means to lure people there, but for them it's justified because it's a tradition, or it's for their harvest or whatever. It's not just some madman who wants to kill for killing's sake. So they've kind of almost got a point, even though they're going about it in quite a nasty way. So
Yeah.
yeah, I guess the antagonist can be left to interpretation, but for me, it's tension and it's a strong lead with some form of relatability.
Yeah. Hey, Ken, welcome. With an antagonist, you want them to have a reason. At least
Yeah.
it doesn't necessarily have to be the best reason, but have a reason. And with the Wicker Man, I mean, spoiler alert, people, for those, and I'm talking about the original, not necessarily the Nicolas Cage one, not the
Bees,
bees.
the beast.
um, but yeah, they were doing that. They would kidnap people and pretty much sacrifice them to, what was it, their god or whatever, to bring in harvest so they can eat
Yeah.
and so they can live, not understanding that no, science has proven things are dying because of this and this, not because of invisible sky daddy. And it's one of those things. But I love that because they weren't necessarily evil, but I'm gonna quote something from G Gundam, so my nerd's coming out here.
Okay.
You're doing things for the right reasons, just the wrong way. That's the
That's
best way
it.
to put it.
They have a motive, and to them it's just, it's not a case of it's just a lunatic's broken out of a mental asylum and is going on a spree. Not to say there's anything bad with those films, because sometimes they have some great moments. I love all sorts of horrors, but when the killers, antagonists have a reason that they believe in, whether it's right or wrong, then I think that makes it all the more interesting. Because especially if you as a viewer find some films where you think, I don't agree with their methods, but they kind of have a point with whatever they're talking about. Yeah, I guess relatability has to kind of work both ways at times, antagonist and protagonist.
Yeah, so it's interesting how that goes along, and we were also speaking about this, how unfortunately, and this will go to your thing, Darren, how unfortunately I find myself, if I watch a slasher or a horror film, I root for the antagonist. I root for the killer. And do you think it's because we're just desensitized to everything and we're annoyed and it's like just wipe them out, and because unfortunately usually when something works, everyone copies it. We see it over and over and over, and it's no longer good, and we just don't care. So, is it possible that overseeing things has made it difficult for a good horror film to be made in modern times?
I guess difficult, yes, but not impossible. I mean, there's factors that will come into play, um, that will be maybe outside of the directors and producers' control, and that can be studios, the financiers basically saying, we want to see more of this. We want this to happen quicker. We want to get to the action because, especially in the 90s to early 2000s, slashers made money, and that's kind of, and then it went into the whole sort of like torture genre with the Saw films and Hostel films and such. So yeah, you'll always have the imitators, the originators, and then the imitators that come along afterwards. But I guess there are. I've seen a few films recently that have had really interesting ideas that I've been surprised by, or have visually looked really unique and interesting. Um, I haven't seen one that I would necessarily say that I think has stuck the landing or seen that idea to all the way through. I mean, some examples of recent films that I have thought are quite creepy, but I haven't necessarily thought they are excellent films. You know, good films, but not excellent. Would be the British film Censor, about 1980s video nasty censorship. But also, it's got this story of a censor whose young sister went missing many years ago. She watches these films which have got awful violence in them, and puts like a censorship ratings on them, and believes that her sister is involved in one of these productions, and you're questioning what is real and what isn't. And another film recently that I reviewed on my show was it's called Come Play. It's about a woman who has awful nightmares, these terrible nightmares, and it seems to be kind of coming through into reality. Not like Freddy Krueger, but it's involving sleep studies and the potential for this other realm to exist. Visually, I thought that was incredible. It had these like Art Deco, uh, I guess like really subdued Silent Hill ideas of this dream world. It's really hard to describe. It's very shadowy, but it just looks so majestic and dark and evil. But then it got to the end, and I won't say anything, but sometimes it's the ending's not satisfying, and for me, if you don't have a satisfying conclusion, whether that's good or bad, happy or sad, but a satisfying conclusion, then I don't think it's necessarily a good horror. So I would say it has become more difficult. A lot of ideas have been kind of rinsed and repeated. But I do think that if you can put the time in to go through the guff, you do sometimes find a gem in the rough, whether it could have been better or whether it's just one of those films that's flown under the radar. Yeah, I guess with a lot of with the way that you can self-distribute your own films these days, it's great because it gives more people an opportunity to get their vision out there, but oversaturation makes it very easy to overlook,
Yeah.
good films.
Yeah. Now, speaking of films, you yourself have some credit, don't you?
uh, yeah, I've got some for better and worse credits. Yeah, what do you want to know about the films, Mel?
Oh, there was a film that I believe you did with a certain rock star. What was that? Voodoo Vegas guy. I don't know, some British prick. Why don't you tell us about that?
Our good friend Lawrence on on Ministry of Slam. Yes. So basically, I'll give the little brief of how I got into horror filmmaking. So I had a lot of interest and kind of background in writing. It was kind of the subject that I had an affinity for at school and college. Even now, I'm sort of resuming some open university, which is kind of like distance-based studying in English literature and stuff. It's always been an interest. But growing up, I always thought I'd love to be an author, but I didn't see it as a viable job just because how many can be successful, if that makes sense? How many can make it a career? I guess that comes down to, now that I'm older, perspective. You can make anything a career, really. But anyway, I'd started working in retail to earn some money. I met a guy called Peter Goddard, who was making his first film, a British film called Season of the Witch. He asked if I could do a small drunk role in the film, which I thought, well, that's fine. I get paid in beer, fine by me. But going through conversations with him, he understood my love of horror and writing, so that then led into some co-writing credits, little bit roles, and we made a film called Harvest of the Dead, where I was playing a plague doctor. It came basically from an idea of we want to make a slasher because he's tried doing ghost films and folk horror, so let's try and do a blood and guts film, right? We shot it over the course of a few years because it was made for nothing. Shipped it out to a couple of distributors. It had a limited release with SRS Cinema in the States, and I can't remember the name. It's like Dark Media or something. I've completely forgotten the name for this other company. But anyway, we then had the idea, let's do a sequel. And for me, my writing, I need to have a spark or an idea, and from there, it's kind of like I can't really stop. I need to as the ideas are coming, I need to get them written down. So I had this treatment for the sequel, wrote that up. We basically, I'd written this because we had a house party scene. We wanted to take it from the woods, which was the first film was set, along with, kind of some Frankenstein elements and zombies, and move it into suburbia, kind of like with the influence of Halloween, but bringing across some of the other ideas, and also bringing makeup artists on board. So we're not just doing our awful version of effects. Anyway, we had 3 days booked at our producer David Rogers' house. He kindly let us use his house for the house party scenes. Got all these actors down. We'd filmed the first day with this core group. Our main actors and actresses, Danny Thompson, who was a guest on Ministry of Horror. She's a big scream queen in the UK. And we'd done a day's filming. We got to the second day, which with zero budget filmmaking, it comes down to when people are available. So the second day was about 4 months later. One of the 4 leads just no-showed. We'd filmed an entire day previously of his scenes, setting up his scenes with the group, getting the chemistry, and he no-showed. Wouldn't respond on his phone, wouldn't respond to the groups, nothing. Okay. I'd written a scene initially for some tattoo artist friends of mine to be this group of rockers at a party. They're basically background actors, but there's a scene where a particular character gets a little bit too handsy and aggressive with our lead actress, and they kind of step in to go, right, get out the party, gets a little bit physical. But ultimately, those guys had kind of their availability was stuck up. So I contacted Lawrence Case from the Ministry of Slam, and his bandmate and one of my best friends, Ash Moulton, both of Voodoo Vegas, and said, would you guys like to be background party guests, rockers in a party? We get to the day where one of our leads, who was due to die on that day, no shows. So I said to Lawrence, I know you got kind of just want to sign on for an hour or two to hang out in the background, eat some potato chips and drink a beer. Would you mind doing some lines and being killed? And yeah, he was a great sport. He even went down to one of the local superstores to get a new shirt because he was going to get bloodied. And we put what was called like we. Okay, so we do try and put safety first here before this sounds like we almost killed him. But so we didn't want to use. And I say we, it was more Peter who was like lead director on this. I was co-writer, Plague Doctor, and I got like a co-directing credit, even though I just kind of helped some scenes. We didn't want to use retractable blades because unless you have them professionally made, they look awful. They look like toys. So he wanted to use a real knife, but use a stab-proof vest. So I was on edge, Mel. I was very much like, oh my God, what if something goes wrong? What if something goes wrong? We get the stab-proof vest. We get the makeup artist to attach these different blood packs onto it. And we basically did some testers, made sure that we knew the exact area that was being covered by the vest. I was shaking. I stood there with my mask on and big coat with this knife, just like, oh my goodness. Okay, look, I'll try and go gentle. And Peter's then like, no, look crap if you go gentle. You need to go in and stab properly. And we shot the scene. We got some stabs, stood up, and he said he felt nothing. So clearly, thankfully, this was a good stab-proof vest. And then when he was led on the floor, we got some more stabs. It looked great when we were filming it. I think due to the darkness of the lighting, the blood doesn't look quite so visceral on the finished product, which is a shame. But the makeup artist did a great job on the kind of the slash and stab wounds, because his body is found in the bathtub a bit later on, and that's how he got his first feature film credit. I know he's done some extra work, but yeah, it was a lot of fun. And this was way before, I think at this point, Ministry of Slam was on its second or third hiatus, so it wasn't even on the air at the time.
Wow. I can feel your pain though. You're
it's gone
just
quiet
like,
again.
Oh my
now.
gosh!
The USB lead might have come out.
Wow. So I gotta find this movie. You can't hear me? The USB came out. Okay. Let's see if we can fix
Well, I
it.
think the USB lead's gone. I can't hear
All
anything.
right, is it back?
Oh, yeah, it's back.
Okay.
Sorry, so what were you saying?
No, I was saying I can only imagine how scared and nervous you were, and imagine what some of the, big budget movies are like, with someone holding this knife, you grab this chick by the throat and you make it look convincing. I mean, what type of mindset do you have to go into to actually transform into a killer?
So for me, it was kind of you initially feel silly on the first sort of day of doing the first film. There's parts where I had to hang in the background while the group of actresses are going past in the woods, and I kind of step out. And when you're there filming, you stood with this dodgy looking mask on in the middle of the woods, and you think like, oh god, this feels kind of silly. But for me, it was when I initially then looked back at the footage on the camera, and it's like, okay, now I can kind of visualize it from a viewer's perspective, and I can get more into that mode of things. I definitely consider myself more a behind the camera type guy. I kind of took on these killer roles in the two halves of the Dead films, I guess, really because I'm a large guy. I'm 6'2", and so it seemed easy to basically go, oh, you can do it. It saves us trying to find someone. We'll just put a mask on you and a coat and give you an axe or whatever. But I guess, like I say, it was seeing back some of the footage, especially coming into the second film, because during the first film, it was my first time having quite an extended role, in front of camera. Hi, Jello Ray, just seen Jello Ray's in the chat, and Daughters of Lilith. But then, kind of coming from that experience to then being more invested in the writing and the work on Harvest of the Dead Halloween Night, you then kind of I don't think I necessarily got into the mindset of a killer, but I just very much I was visualizing how it's going to look. So I'm there looking at my victim or whatever, but in my head the whole time is, okay, so what's the lighting currently like? Okay, so the director's kind of over there, so the angle's going to look like this particular angle. Okay, let's go for it, because I know how I want it to look. I'm not directing the scene, but I know how I want it to look. So that's kind of how I'm going to play it. We got some. I mean, from that filming, we got some funny stories. There's a there's quite a few raunchy scenes in Harvest of the Dead Halloween Night. The idea being, well, distributors like boobs and blood, so
I
let's
mean,
do that.
sounds good to me.
Yeah. So I won't name names in case they watch this, but there was two actors, an actor and actress, and their scene was that they are having intercourse, and are then killed by me. So the idea being the guy's in one position, all of a sudden he's to fall flat on top of the girl, who's like, hey, what's going on, before she realizes there's blood coming from the back of his head, and I'm stood there with this hammer, which I then raise to bring down. Cut to the next scene. So we kind of got that, but firstly, the actor and the actress spent a lot of the time while we were filming getting comfortable with each other, so they were good for the scene. So I guess kind of like method acting, but
Oh,
yeah. So yeah, that was odd. And then when we get to the scene and they're both there completely naked, cameraman is over the other side with the director. It's quite a small room. I'm just stood there while the makeup artist is dabbing fake blood down the actor's back down to his butt crack, and I'm just there with this hammer going, what are we doing? Can we just roll the scene and get this done? Because I'm just stood behind a naked guy. The girl's covering her shame there. And you're just thinking, oh, I hope this looks good, because otherwise I just
very
feel
awkward
right
moment.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, but it looks decent, and also fair play to the actors and actresses, because they were just like, do you want us to have pants on or pants off? Like, how do you want it to look for the scene? And I'm just like, I'll defer you to the director, because that's his choice.
Yeah. I mean, no, pants off. We have to sell the movie. Yeah.
Yeah. And then,
Hell,
like, and then after one of the scenes, the actress, or it's a different actress because there's quite a few sex scenes. She says, she turns to me while the director's just reviewing the footage, and she goes, "Was my were my bits on camera, or was that covered?" I'm just there like, I'm nowhere near the camera. I've no idea. Ask the director. I'm sure we could shoot it again if it's inappropriate. But goodness me, the things you see on a film set.
sounds like I've missed out. That's
We'll book a plane ticket for the next one.
yeah. It's just some awkward guy in the corner. Ooh.
You can be the sound guy. Honestly, I've done the sound on a couple of scenes, and it's, especially if it's a sex scene, it's so awkward because you're just there with your headphones on, just hearing kissing sounds and squelching sounds.
No,
And it's
I
like,
wouldn't like that. Plus, you got to hold the boom up too, and that's no.
yeah,
I'll just be the gopher. Like I'll bring sandwiches and water. Uh, and hello, Jellere doll, welcome. MOS Network. I'm assuming that's Lawrence. Welcome.
yeah. Hey,
But
dude.
um, but yeah. So I mean, it sounds like it's fun, of course, looking back on it. But at the moment, it's like, oh, this is kind of awkward. Please, just get this over with. Let's go. Come on. Let's move it. But
Yeah.
it makes you wonder too, because in the 80s it was a lot of boobs being shown in
Mm.
slashers and the horrors and everything, and it's like, man, all right, run it back. It's like, are you kidding me? Like, how do you I wouldn't be able to do it. I could not do it. I wouldn't be able to contain myself. Like Darren said, he said that he wouldn't know where to look, what to do with his hands. Same here. It's like, yeah.
We had one scene where the lead actress, Danny Thompson, who at the very start of the film opens and she's topless on the phone talking to the actress who's at the end of the first film. So we try and connect the films, but straight away we were going, right, let's give the people what they want. They want large boobs.
Yeah.
We had a scene later on where her character gets attacked or is put in peril by my character before a policeman comes in and kind of saves her, where basically she's looking over this banister, she's seeing this macabre stuff going on downstairs because we've got zombies and this and everything. I come out of this room, grab her around the waist, drag her into the room and slam the door. But in talking about getting into character, I kind of just thought, right, okay, I, you know, I don't know how much she weighs, I don't know how strong I am. Like, she wasn't a big person at all, but you want to be convincing in a scene. You're going for a take, so I didn't want to be like, you know, you want to look convincing. So anyway, I just thought I'm just gonna have to go for it. I can't be all namby pamby and be like, oh, sorry, we're doing the scene, we've got to go for it. So we get the action. I go behind her, one arm around the waist, lift her up, go through the door, slam it, and instinctively I then threw her to the floor, which thankfully was very thick carpet.
Okay.
And as soon as I did that, before the director even said cut, I'm going, oh my god, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry. And funnily enough, because thankfully again the carpeting was quite thick, she was just going, wow, oh, that was quite nice. We could do another take of that if you want.
Oh wow.
Like, like,
Oh.
this could have been quite an awkward scene. She was like, "Ow, why did you throw me?" But yeah,
I'm picturing though, because there's stereotype of Brits being overly nice at times, and I'm just picturing, oh dear, oh my, I'm terribly sorry for tossing you to the ground like that. Please allow me to pick you up and have a spot of tea. Terrible
it
stereotype.
wasn't too far off that. It was basically, yeah, I was kind of just groveling, like, "I'm so sorry. Are you okay? Are you okay? Do you need a hand up?" And she was like, "Oh, yeah, that was good. Yeah. We can do another take if you like." And I thought, oh, thank
You
God.
see, I think when it comes to this sort of thing, you kind of just have to be the character. Just forget
Yeah.
every rule that you know. Just manhandle them, and it's like, if something happens, it happens.
We did a scene in the first film with this guy called Lee Craven, who he's an actor. He does his own like kind of rapping as well, but he also does like a lot of explosive effects. I think he worked on the Brad Pitt World War One or World War Two film Fury, doing
Okay.
like a lot of the explosions. we had him along in the first film for this death scene, and he initially gets attacked with this kind of razor wire around the neck. And again, this is my first time in that one doing like a quite a key role and doing this kind of kills. I'm kind of like, okay, so let me know when it's like too tight with the thing. And he goes, no, we want it to look good. So literally, just go as hard as you can. And I'm like, I'm 6'2", and this, he's 5'7", so he's a bit shorter. I'm a lot larger. I'm thinking I don't want to go crazy, but he's like, no, I will tell you if you're going too hard, but we want this to look good. So just literally put your foot in my back and just pull back. And I was like, if you're sure. And yeah, I went for it, and he was just like, yeah, fine, yeah, I hope that looked really good. Like, you sometimes just have to go for it, but at the same point, you think, I don't want to, get too
Yeah,
overzealous.
and yeah, but sometimes you just have to. You got to trust that someone will say stop or
Yeah.
something. So fun stories. Like that's an experience. You're gonna have to now do something to because you're gonna have to come back on Unexplained after you film something else to give us more stories. But I think we also found out what makes a good horror: blood, boobs, and going out of control. So,
Yeah, pretty much.
but speaking of good horror, so I think we can say that we have Western horror and Eastern horror. Which is better in your opinion?
That is a tough one, Mel. That is a tough one. So if I was to look at my catalogue of films, the films that I kind of buy, it would lean me towards Western by kind of default, but the the Eastern films that I have seen have generally been more kind of impactful or unnerving. I mean, there's the most obvious one that jumps out to me would be, Ring,
Mhm.
the original Ring. I remember being incredibly freaked out by that when I first saw it many years ago. To even more recently, I did a review a few weeks back of a Shudder exclusive called The Sadness. Oh my god, is that an assault on the senses? It's an Eastern film. I think it may be Korean, but I don't want to say definitively. I'm not entirely sure. It might be Taiwanese. But that is next level terror. Um, that's a tough one. I don't want to sit on the fence, Mel, but I'm kind of
It's okay if you do. I'll give my
yeah.
opinion and I'll jump over the fence. So, but for me, I think modern Eastern horror slashers, supernatural films are better than Western. And I think that because with Eastern filmmaking, it's a minimalist approach. And I appreciate that. Whereas with Western filmmaking, for me, it seems more like shock and awe. And I have an issue with that. I mean, don't get me wrong, you can have that shock and awe, but you have to build up to it, which we don't, in my opinion, we don't necessarily see in Western horrors in the modern times. In the 80s and 70s and parts of the 90s, we see that.
Yeah.
And when it comes to the Eastern films, like especially the Korean ones, they have it down. They know how to build an atmosphere. Ambient music, ambient noises go so they do so much to mess with your senses and like, did I just see that or did I hear that or maybe I didn't? And it's not so straightforward all the time. And even if you do see whatever you see, so we'll use the ring, Ringu, as an
Mm.
example with I don't know her Japanese name. I know her name's like Samara or something like that.
Yeah.
But or not
Sudoku.
Japanese, Korean. That's Korean, right? What is the ring? Is that Korean or Japanese?
I want to say Japanese,
Yeah.
but I don't want to say it definitively.
Yeah. Well, anyway, we get images of her, but we don't get the full thing with her. Same with The Grudge. We get
Mm.
images, but we don't get the full thing. That anticipation builds up and it freaks us out. Oh, Paranormal Witch says it's Korean.
Okay.
It builds up and it freaks us out, and then we get to the payoff where it's like, oh my gosh, you know. And with Western, you're getting chased and we see what's chasing you, and you might have Billy Bad trying to fight him. I don't know. It's too scripted. I know that sounds weird,
Yeah.
but it's too scripted. And again, with the Eastern, I think a lot of their lore goes well with the stories they tell.
Yeah.
Looking deeper into it. Uh, but I will have to say this: when it comes to horror films and stories, slasher stories based off of real life events, I think what the Western filmmakers are better at that. Texas Chainsaw Massacre being one of them. Uh,
Yeah.
the Exorcism of Emily Rose. I don't know if you ever saw that, but that's based
I've
off
seen
of
that one. Yeah.
Annalise Michelle. Oh, whew, that's a rough one. um,
Yeah.
like I think they do those better. Hold up, let me check my notes because I actually wrote this down here. Texas, yeah, The Hills Have Eyes, which
Yeah.
Cannibal inspired that one. What's his name here? Sawney Ben. He was Scottish. Darren, you might know this one. You're a Scot. Tell us about Sawney Ben here. You a cannibal, Darren? God darn it.
Yeah,
Wolf
I
Wolf
think that
Creek.
was it was something to do with this. I vaguely know of the story. I don't know the details, but yeah, it's
Mhm.
like a Scottish family or a Scottish tribe that were in the Highlands, resorted to cannibalism, or that might have even resorted to it. They might have just gone, "Well, let's just do this."
Yeah,
Um, but yeah, it's that's a dark one. That's a very dark
yeah,
story.
yeah. Wolf Creek. That one.
Mm,
Oof. That one's hard for me to watch.
yeah,
That one's hard for me to watch. Hey, Lawrence. Hello, Meryl. Thank you guys for watching.
you guys.
Appreciate it. But yeah, Wolf Creek is based off a real thing where the backpackers were getting killed, disappearing, getting killed. And man, so
Yeah.
when it comes to that, yeah, the Western, although that might also mean that we're crazy and we're just gonna kill everybody, unfortunately. But when it comes to those type of stories, they do very, very good at them.
Mm,
And we were speaking about this before we went live. I was informing you about Nightmare on Elm Street, how that was inspired by, going back to the notes here. This is why you have notes. It's a shame though that my handwriting's so bad. So I actually Asian Deaf Syndrome. There we go. That was
that's it.
inspired by
Yeah.
Asian Deaf Syndrome, an old man walking on the sidewalk and a bully. And
If we're talking like films based on true stories, I remember years ago, a few years back, seeing this film. I initially thought it was based on a novel, but I believe it's based on a novel that's based on a true story, which is it's called like Jack Ketchum's The Girl Next Door.
mm,
And when you read up about what actually happened, the film isn't too far off. Almost the film's slightly lighter than what actually happened, and that's saying something because
yeah, I know the story. Like, what's her name? Sylvia or something. So
yes, yeah,
yeah, so she was sexually harassed. She was starved. She was tortured. Like, oh, it was terrible.
yeah. I was watching that film and then looking up afterwards on Wikipedia and just realizing this wasn't just some crazy story. Like this was based on real life events. It's just even more shocking that that kind of thing could happen.
Yeah, and I think that's the impact though, because you're like, oh wow, this is real, and it
Mm.
goes beyond entertainment. It's like, how can we do this to one another?
Oh yeah,
And that's, in a weird way. It's a sick way, but in a weird way, that's what makes it so good,
yeah,
because it's an actuality versus pure fiction. it's that took a
Yeah.
turn, didn't it? That sounds dark. Now people are
Yeah, we
gonna
taking a depressing turn there.
yeah, we need to lighten this up, darn it. But we're not gonna lighten it up. We're gonna go into something else because this is a paranormal channel for the most part. And I gotta know, Tez, are you a believer?
So, I consider myself an open-minded skeptic, and by that I mean kind of like, and not just because I'm doing a show coming up soon with the Gruff about the X-Files, but as cheesy as it sounds, I want to believe, but I need that experience or seeing something that I can't explain. So yeah, in short, I've had a couple of experiences, which is why I'm not like completely closed off to the potential of the paranormal, but I'm not fully, I'm not fully on board. I'm partially on board. I've got one foot on the believer scale and the other foot off.
That's not a bad thing because sometimes believers can go just too far where it's like, okay, guys. But then sometimes skeptics, they're too close minded to where it's like, come on now. But saying that, not every unexplained thing is paranormal. And sometimes paranormal things can be explained. Um, so it is good being an open-minded skeptic because oftentimes I'm skeptic myself. I usually approach things with a viewpoint of yeah, sure, sure. you know,
Yeah.
but I'm open-minded to it. And you have to be, otherwise, you'll believe every freaking thing. Just like I try to tell people, the definition of paranormal is, and this is a simple oh, I almost gave you the middle finger somehow. That's weird.
Oh.
um this is a very simplified definition,
Yeah.
but it's the paranormal is basically an event that can't be explained by science yet. Eventually science will be able to explain it. The supernatural, however, that's different because science will never be able to explain the supernatural because it doesn't follow the laws of physics. So the two are used interchangeably, but they really shouldn't be.
Yeah.
But that's okay. So you said though that you had a couple of unexplained experiences. We won't call them paranormal. We'll just call them unexplained. And hello, Richard Goulet from Canada. Bonjour, depending on which Canada part of Canada you're from. But yeah, what's your unexplained experiences?
Okay, so the first one came from doing a ghost hunt with my sister for her birthday. There's a manor house near, it's a place in England called Christchurch, which is kind of the south coast near like Bournemouth Beach, that kind of area, south of England basically. And she wanted to do a ghost hunt, so me and one of her friends were like, "It's your birthday, we'll come along and do it." Um, so we're going to these different areas of the building. They do these things. Again, I'm very naive. I don't know the names for all the different objects and tools and such. But we do this thing where you've got these two rods that you hold up, and they'll move in different
Dowsing rods.
directions. Yeah, we did some of that. We then went to this large kind of dining hall type area, and we were doing moving the glass. Like everyone puts their fingertips on top of the glass. I could tell that one woman seemed to be pushing it more. You could kind of just tell when she took her hands off, nothing was happening. When she put it, you can see. I felt I could see from the body language that she was moving it. So I was like, okay, this is for my sister's benefit. Whatever, right? But then we were doing this thing where we were in we were in the same room, stood in a circle, and they had like a uh, EMF reader or something. It was basically, it flashes like a green dot
Yeah,
when there's
EMF.
EMF. Yeah. So for the longest time, it wasn't really flashing anything, and different people were saying, "Are you a man? Are you a woman? have you come to talk to us? This sort of thing. And as they're saying these things, I all of a sudden felt the strongest cold chill on the back of my neck for literally 1 second, maybe 2 seconds, then it went. And I kind of just thought, like, it's not like, it's not like when you get a cold shiver when it's like, oh, someone's walked over my grave, is kind of the saying we have over here. It just suddenly such a cold feeling directly on the back of my neck. And I kind of thought, should I say something? So I just said, I've just had this cold sensation. And they said, has anyone just tried to touch this man's neck? Light starts blinking. Thinking, okay, can't explain that. The moment continues on, and then all of a sudden I get the strongest smell, again for just a second or so, the strongest smell of woman's perfume, like quite rich, like high society is the only thing I could kind of put with it. And again, I said, I've just got the strongest smell of women's perfume. And they said, is that you? And it was blinking again. This is, are you trying to connect with this man? It blinked again. And that was all we had in that room. Like other people were saying, oh, I can see a woman at the top of the stairs and all this stuff. No other lights. That's probably the most that I've been kind of intrigued or freaked out. The other two instances are a lot quicker. One of them, so I used to live in a flat in a castle. It was a castle by a river, and it was made into flats or apartments. But it was very creepy. I mean, it had been there since the early 1800s. It was made into flats in the 1970s. And there was one particular evening, I hadn't been drinking or anything, no influences. Gone to bed at a normal time, lights off as per usual, just normal, going to sleep. And I remember distinctly hearing a woman's voice in my ear, my left ear, very clearly saying, like, no, but it was like a no. And it woke me up with a start. My door was wide open and my light was on. And this was at like 1 a.m. or 11 minutes past 1 or something in the morning. Couldn't explain it. Didn't live with a woman. I had a flatmate, but he was away on tour. I know I closed my door. I know I'd turned my lights off. So that was weird. And the final moment was I lived with my dad for a couple of years recently. My mother had passed, so my dad was on his own. I was looking to save up to buy a property, which is very difficult over. It's probably difficult everywhere, but well, we are getting to house pricing and all that stuff. So I stayed with my dad for a couple of years, and there'd be some instances where I'd be alone in the house. And I'd hear these weird sounds, not like the sound of a house settling, but just these weird sort of like, almost like a woman's voice, but it's in a bottle. It's kind of like, I don't know how to describe it, but just these odd faint sounds. And I'd have a couple of times where I'd be going into like the conservatory where the laundry machine was, and I'd get these instances of seeing like a black kind of shadow figure in the corner of my eye. I said it to my sister, and she goes, oh, that sounds like an imp. They're bad news. And I thought, I don't know anything about this stuff. But it would happen a number of times. And it got to the point where she said, download this app. Can't really remember what the app was called, but it was like, they use it in like Ghost Adventures, where it uses your camera. And if it picks up the form of a body or a person, it creates like a kind of, like a little graph of the outline, like dots with sticks.
Mm-hmm.
And I went around the bungalow, the flats, the house. It's a bungalow, so it's one story basically. And in the area near the kitchen by the conservatory where I'd get these instances, there was a couple of moments where it did get an outline of a figure where there was no figure at quite a short sort of height. And I thought, is that just a quirk of the app? Is that something to try and freak you out? I don't know, but yeah, those are the three things where I've kind of been like, I've experienced something or seen something or heard something that I can't explain.
I'm trying to think what it could be, and I also see that Sarah has popped in here asking a very weird question. Wayne Gretzky was a reptilian hybrid, true or false? Like, sure, we'll just go with true because why true, not? Yeah. But aside from that, I'm trying to figure out, what would be an explanation for that with the app. it could be mapping in just whatever, just it could be mapping
Yeah.
in dust flying or something like that,
Yeah.
But the first one with feeling something on your neck and smelling perfume, now that's a bit different. And of course, hearing something in your ear when you're asleep and a door being open, that's like, wait, 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 you know. So it will make you think and wonder. And this is going to be me doing a shameless plug, which might interest you.
Okay.
Tomorrow on Unexplained Possibilities, 5 p.m. PST, we are going to be live with two paranormal investigators, Eric
Okay.
McGill and David Wooliver from Our Haunted Minds, the RU Media Network show. So I think I'm going to bring this to their attention and get their opinion on it.
Okay.
So yeah,
Okay. That sounds good.
perfect timing, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, that is it's a little scary. But what would you need for you to be a 100% full believer? Do you need to see like a ghost literally walk in front of you, wave, and then vanish in front of your eyes? Or do you need to wake up with scratches? Or what do you need? You don't want the scratches. Let's not
I
do
don't want the
that.
scratches. Yeah. It's an odd one because while I'd never want to use a Ouija board, like even though I'm a skeptic, at the same point I don't want to tempt fate. Well, whatever you consider fate to be. Um, but I guess if I were using a Ouija board, kind of having that experience of, well, I'm not moving this, and I'm feeling it move. That would be, I guess, maybe one thing. And I guess with ghosts, I get the idea, or spirits. I get the idea that I wouldn't necessarily see, a ghost in front of me wave. And I guess I'm more open to that um, perception of like the corner of your eye sensation, where you may catch a glimpse of something that isn't there, but it's definitely not going to linger around long enough for you to kind of to process it. I think, okay, well that I can accept. Um, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I guess I watch those entertainment shows occasionally. Like my sister's a huge fan of Ghost Adventures and stuff, and she did get me onto Portals to Hell, which I probably would say out of any of the shows that I have watched, I found the more plausible, just because they do seem like they're trying to explain it.
Is that the
With
one with Jack Osborne?
it's Jack Osborne and Katrina Weidman.
Okay, yeah, I know the show.
Um, yeah, and so I guess I watch those kind of things occasionally, and again, I've still never seen anything. When they kind of go, "Oh, did you hear that? It said this," and I always kind of assume there's this sensation where if you hear something and then you hear something with written text, that can interpret your mind to hear that as it's written. If that makes sense.
Oh no, it makes total sense because you're replacing that sound. You have a visual cue, and it's like, oh yeah, I hear. So yeah, it makes total sense. And sometimes you have to be careful with that. I do like it when investigators will just play it without any captions and tell us what you hear,
Yeah,
and we'll see if it matches up. And I've heard a few things without knowing details and whatnot. And it's like, well, to me, it sounds like this. Like, yeah, that's what I hear. So it's
yeah.
very interesting. You have to do it in a blind way, but it's also entertainment.
I guess, yeah, that's the thing, because you get a lot of those shows where it'd be like, "Oh, did you hear that bang?" Could well have been a very genuine bang response, whatever, but there's however many people on the crew, it's very easy to kind of, I assume, fabricate those things. So I guess for me to be a believer probably also comes down to me to try more experiences to encounter those things. Like I say, I very much, and I want to believe. I'm a skeptic until I experience something. That's kind of what will make me believe, but at the same point, I'm not really putting myself in those situations or doing those activities where I would maybe experience something. So I guess I've got to put the effort in to see if I will experience something, or if I think nothing's happening.
Yeah. So, well, it looks like you're going to be going on another ghost tour. uh,
I'd be interested. I would be interested. Yeah.
so, what are your thoughts on the supernatural movies then, the paranormal movies? Like you mentioned Hereditary and, of course, pretty much everything Warren's, good Lord. Uh, oh my gosh, now that I'm trying to say it, I can't. Annabelle and
Oh yeah, The
um,
Conjuring.
The Conjuring. Yeah, what's your opinion on those? Do you think they're actually based off of real events, and why do you think people like them so much?
Um, do I think they're based on real events? Not not necessarily. I think that there's some initial basis in reality that gets dramatized up to make it a film. Um, because of there always being these cases, with the Warrens, their names attached. And I think it might have been when you were on the show, Mel, that I kind of asked the question: how many of these instances that the Warrens have been involved with have they solved, or they've been directly responsible for stopping what was going on? And it doesn't necessarily seem that they helped or stopped things too often.
Not
So
really.
no.
They tended to make things somewhat worse. Or a lot. I won't say a lot of people don't know this. A lot of people don't want to accept this.
Mm,
I won't flat out say they're frauds. Some people will say, "Oh, the Warrens are straight up frauds." I won't. I won't say that. I won't use that language. But since Ed's passing in 2006, more information has come out from authors and everything that said he gave them liberty to spruce up the stories and make it a little bit more. So you saying that dramatize? You're spot
yeah.
on.
Yeah, I mean, I do think I think there are instances out there with some films that, have represented, I guess, real life events better than. I mean, I enjoy the Conjuring films and that universe, but purely from like a entertainment perspective rather than thinking, like I spoke to my sister recently when she was on the show, and we talked about the Conjuring films, and the second film being based on the Enfield haunting. And to me, as far as I'm aware, from the limited research that I've done on that haunting, it was fraudulent. Like the girls were caught faking voices or jumping when they were supposedly levitating, things like that. Um, and obviously, that was then made or adapted into the second Conjuring film, where things are going crazy. There's a demonic nun. There's things flying through the windows and near-death experiences. Um, so, I mean, I do like a good paranormal film, but I do find I would veer more towards something like Hereditary, where the paranormalness is involving some form of cult or religious sect, or kind of similar to like Rosemary's Baby, where you've got this paranormal element that has real individuals involved who you wouldn't necessarily associate with a cult or something demonic, or in Hereditary, you see a number of these people throughout the film just as background fodder, who later on, without going into spoilers, are kind of revealed to have a lot more involvement in something quite satanic or demonic. So that is more where my interest lies. I think when it comes to anything paranormally in cinema, I do lean more towards an interest in demon type stuff. I don't know why. I don't know what it is, but there's something about the imagery, the kind of symbolism, like symbols and
Yeah,
stuff relating to it. But
it's,
I will. That's that's what I'll lean a bit more towards in preference.
yeah, a lot of history dealing with them as well. in Hereditary. Yeah, no spoilers for you guys, but I think it was on your show where I told you, no, that's a real thing.
Yeah.
So they didn't do them quite right, but it is what it is. Uh, I I like the supernatural horrors better than the straight up slasher ones, more so in reality. I told you that I really love Child's Play. That's one of my
Yeah.
all time favorite things, even though I would say it's more of a slasher than a horror film. Um, but it's just freaking hilarious. And what does that say about me? And with the demonic things or the ancient deities and gods, it because I study this stuff, I know about the occult, I look into it. It has to be done specifically well for me to really get into it.
Yeah.
And so sometimes it's like, oh man, you guys are doing this wrong. Like, no, you don't say ula cabra to summon something. You say una nin moma. That's how you summon it. you know. So it's interesting though. But it is what it is. Although some of that stuff, I do think they need to be more careful with because they do accidentally reveal information that can be used in ritual. And it's always some idiot out there who's gonna do something.
Yeah, there will be the curiosity 9 times out of 10 will kill the cat.
Mhm.
And whilst, I'm a skeptic, an open-minded skeptic, when it comes to anything involving demons or dark kind of spirits, that's the kind of thing where, let's say if I wanted to try out new things or, tests or whatever to test if I believe or not, I would be very much more hesitant to do anything when it comes to invoking anything, even if I think, well, logically that can't exist. I would still have that air of caution to think I don't want to mess with something that I don't understand. So yeah, I'm intrigued to experience something more paranormal in line with what I have, but if that was then at the expense of opening myself up to some dark some dark demonic force, then no,
Yeah.
I'll
Well,
stay where I am.
I'll say this: a good portion of that is psychological, more so than real world. And saying that, you put out what you receive. You expect something dark, crazy, and dangerous. You get back something dark, crazy, and dangerous. That's not a 100% thing, but
No.
it's something. But I'll introduce you to some people. If you
Okay.
actually want to experience, I'll introduce you to some folks, and I'm pretty sure they'll help you out there.
I'm intrigued. As long as it's all done safely, then
Yeah. As a matter of fact, Darren, I think he probably had to head off, but yeah, Darren, it's time for you to take a trip to England. It's time to let things happen.
oh god.
So we're gonna start wrapping up here, but Tez, I gotta know,
Hmm.
what do you think is needed to make horror movies better than what they currently are? What would you add to them? What would you take away?
Oh, that's a tough one. That is a tough one. What would I add? What would I take away? I think we can bring back tension without jump scares. I don't hate jump scares. I mean, more often than not, I will jump at those moments. I think there's a happy medium between using a jump scare to break tension or using a jump scare to you know elevate a scene from tension to fright. Oh god, that is tough. I think likable and relatable protagonists. I think for a good horror, whilst I do love comedy horror, I do love, all different elements of horror, but I think you kind of almost have to take yourself too seriously to invest the audience in your story. And sometimes films will rely too heavily on comedic elements, and you can use comedy to break up some of the tension, but you'll get some films where I think it's almost to its benefit to keep that tension racketing up. I mean, a recent-ish example, maybe a bit more thriller than horror, would be the first Don't Breathe,
Mm.
where pretty much outside of the first 10, 15 minutes or so, it is tension. You're on edge. And I think it's such a simple premise, and I do believe there are still simple premises and setups out there. Um, but just robbing a blind man's house thinking it's going to be an easy hit because you read a report they got some money, not realizing not only does this blind guy have very lethal skills, but he's also got a very dark secret in his basement. So to kind of what do I think can make horrors great again and bring horrors back? Um, I would probably say to bring horrors back also, and this may seem a bit rudimentary, is proper backing from studios. There always seems to be this fear that an R rating or an 18 rating limits the people that you can get into the seats. But time and time again, if you have the correct marketing and put money behind your marketing, an R rating does not mean a death knell for the film. And I do think for a good horror, it's got to be, in the UK, a 15 or an 18. It doesn't have to necessarily be gore, doesn't have to necessarily be swearing or nudity, but I think a good sense of unease, scares, a strong protagonist, and like we said earlier, an antagonist that has some element of relatability. But yeah, it does seem to be a bit of a lull for horrors, I think, in the last couple of years. There's a couple of standouts, but there's not really a swarm of horror blockbusters these days. So I guess I'd throw those elements in, Mel.
That makes sense to me. I'll agree with that. You would know before I would, because, you're the man. This is your thing. I would actually add, and I know people are going to disagree with this, but I would actually bring back some of the stereotypes. Um, Dumb blonde chick trips, gets killed, black guy dies first. I would bring those back. I kind of miss them. And, and seriously, come on, tell me that wasn't fun. It is a certain element that should be there that was just stupid and fun. And it's, just
I-
that's just me.
a film I'd recommend that does that. That it's a couple of years old now, but it's a horror comedy, and I think part of the comedy is relying on those kind of typical, your dumb blonde, black character dies first. It's called The Final Girls or Final Girls. It's got oh god, I can't remember any of their names. Thomas Middleditch and Adam Devine, and God, who's the lead? The lead is the sister of Vera Farmiga from the Conjuring films. I can't remember her name from the life of me. It's like Tysa Farmiga, and Madchen Ackerman. But it's basically these characters get transported into the world of their favorite 80s slasher film, where these things are occurring, and it's a lot of fun actually. But it's playing those elements up for comedic effect, which is why I think it kind of works in that
Yeah.
regard.
So it almost sounds like a little bit more lighthearted Cabin in the Woods, a little bit.
Yeah, that's a good comparison. Yeah.
Yeah, so okay, I'm gonna check it out. It's on the list. I will give it a watch. Tez, do me a favor. Where the heck can we find you in Ministry of Horror?
Well, so Ministry of Horror screens every Tuesday on YouTube on the MOS Network. It goes out on the podcast feed. You can find it by searching Ministry of Horror or the MOS Network. That will go out every Wednesday. Also on Twitter. Twitter's probably the main place that I'll do postings outside of the MOS Network Discord. So the Twitter is ministry_horror. Or you can find me at Tezzius on most places, which is at TEZZRUS. Sometimes I do horror watch-alongs on Twitch, which is twitch.tv/Tezius, which is just a really fun time where we can just sit back, relax with a drink, and watch some horror films together. But yeah, that's generally my socials, Mel.
All right. And those links can be found in the description below. Also, while you're there, be sure to check out Unexplained Possibilities on Facebook, Twitter, Reddit, and Instagram. Tess, thanks for joining. I had a lot of fun, learned some stuff. Chat, thank you guys for hanging out with us. And with all that said, remember, guys, there are things that go bump in the night. Go ahead and tell them hi. Bye, everybody.